Welcome to our very first podcast, Resilience at Your Core with Candace Bester. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight in the very first of very, very many podcasts. We have a new feature where we're going to be interviewing some very special people every single week. And our hope is that our stories can inspire you. So, without any further ado, I have a very, very special guest tonight. Her name is Reshma. I have known Reshma for close on 2 years. I've worked very closely with her, and I had the privilege of teaching her special child last year in his grade 1 year. And the thing that stood out for me was two things. Was his growth was just completely phenomenal, but then at the same time, her growth. So let me not keep you waiting any longer, and let's welcome Reshma to our podcast.
Hi,
Welcome, Reshma.
Candace. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome, Candace.
So, Reshma, like I just mentioned before you came on, I've known you for just nearly 2 years, and I met you the year before your little one started with me in grade 1. And I can honestly say to you that you are a very different person today than that mommy that I met 2 years ago. So I think this is all about sharing what has worked for you, how you've grown, what your children have taught you, because I believe that our children are our best teachers. We learn from them. We think that they learn from us, but in actual fact, we learn way more about ourselves through them. Um, and before I go on, do you want to maybe just tell everybody how you know me and how your experience, or you can introduce yourself? Thank you.
Okay. So, like you mentioned, I mean, I met you just before my son started grade 1, and I think for all parents, starting grade 1 is a bit challenging and daunting at the same time. So yeah, I was also curious how he's going to manage through the years and things like that. And I think that's when we had our first chat. And we spoke about, okay, you're going to take things slow, and it's the normal. That's how kids grow up, and that's the ebb and flow of schooling life. And I think that's where, when we first initially chatted, um, when you spoke to me, that's where I felt the connection, and I felt that my son would be in the best place possible for him and his personal growth. And then I think as the years went by, months, sorry, or terms, should I say, I learned a lot about myself personally and as a parent. So yeah, and we often chat, Candace. We talk, say hi, check in, how's things. And like you said, recently I sent you a little message to say we're so proud of Narav and all his determination. And I think that's about it. It's about just being there for them, and giving them that little encouragement every day. So
Absolutely. So, if I can just ask you, that first meeting that you and I had before he had even started, you did have a few concerns, and there was a lot of anxiety that I had picked up. And I think that I'm coming from a place of you and every other parent. When our children need to start a new year and we have this idea in their heads, are they going to have the right teacher? Will they succeed? Will this teacher bring the best out in me, in my child? What were your biggest concerns going in to that year?
I think, Candace, for me, and my husband, it was mostly the concentration. I mean, our little one didn't sit still for a bit. And I think it was mostly focusing on that. And for me, that's where the anxiety started, and the worrying as a parent, that's where it all started. So that was
Okay.
the start of
Yes.
it.
Yes. Okay. Okay, great. So when you said his concentration, I just want to put this out there to everybody because this is just one element of something that I've experienced, and I just want to remind everybody who's watching today that I taught for 18 years in the classroom. I'm also a mother of three children: a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old, and I am by no means perfect. I am by no means the best parent, and I'm by no means perfect. But I do believe that I've spent the greater part of the last 13 years studying a lot of human behavior and personal development. And I really have made personal development a huge part of my life. In actual fact, I call it my drug. A drug has a very, very negative connotation, but my drug comes from learning something new and then implementing it and then seeing how quickly it works. And that's why I've developed this program called Grit, Growing Resilience Within, because I believe it's a lot easier than what we think. We just have never been shown how. Now, with regards to the concentration, that is just one label that we give children. There are so many more. There is the child is too bossy, the child is too competitive, the child is too loud, the child is too busy, the child is, and all these things have actually resulted in adults who are coached today who are in their mid 50s and they actually don't know who they are. Because when they were growing up, and I truly believe every parent is doing the best they can with what they know, but when we were growing up, we had to behave a certain way. We had to, and when we didn't, we were punished. And I'm not saying that that was maybe the worst thing under the sun, but what I'm saying is it did result in a generation of people who today don't actually know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they haven't been properly. They don't. That's core self belief is almost what I could say is missing. So when Rav came into my classroom, I'll never forget. I didn't know who he was, but you had spoken to me, and when he walked into my classroom, it was evident very quickly who he was. And immediately I could see that this little boy was just super special. So his intelligence and his general knowledge, he's like a little walking encyclopedia. It's insane. Like he learns new things and I don't even know the stuff that he knows. And so what I did was I really did approach it from a very different way. And I think as parents and teachers, if we can start to get this, I think it will really change the way we do things. To really hone in on their strengths. And when we find that we are struggling with the things that are labeled as too busy and all of those things, and we triggered, that we really do shift the focus from the child to us. So I think for me, I spent the entire year, actually the last 2 years. So it wasn't actually just him, it was a whole lot of different children over the last 2 years. But I spent that time noticing my triggers and then shifting that. And instead of reprimanding and instead of disciplining, I would do the work on myself before I chose what to do. I don't know about you, but if you are upset and if you are angry and you speak to your child, how much do you get out of them out of that space?
Not a lot, eh? It just makes it more frustrating. I had many a times and many episodes like that, especially during COVID time when there was online schooling. It's difficult, and I'm sure many parents would also feel the same. But I think with perseverance, and I think when the penny dropped for me, Candice, is when I realized that maybe I need to shift my perspective. Maybe I need to change a little bit. And that's when I really saw the change in him and us, and he's grown phenomenally. It's amazing when I changed my perspective and changed my approach, that it's absolutely magical. And that's for me where it all started within. And that's the start.
Exactly. And this is the one of the things that I get a lot of resistance about. I've spoken to teachers before. I've posted some really, really challenging things on my groups. And the kickback always comes from when I say these words outright, that the child is not responsible for your triggers. you are responsible for your triggers, because you're only being triggered because of a certain amount of things that actually it's got nothing to do with the child. So I have some really cool stories, and one that stands out for me is I notice when I'm triggered, and then I deal with my trigger before I deal with the child. And I do believe that that has a huge impact on the child's respect for me. Because, for example, you see these children screaming at their parents, and then they get told they're so disrespectful. But at the same time, how are the parents speaking to the children? So that is learned behavior, and the children are actually just mimicking their parents. So if you are the one that's checking in before you go and overreact, I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, your children are going to learn to do exactly the same thing. So the one day I woke up, and from the morning, my little guy, who was 5 at the time, was just so ratty. He had just woken up on the wrong side of the bed, and I was very driven to get to school, to get to work, to get going. And the whole morning he just resisted eating, resisted dressing. And as the morning went, I could just feel I had worked myself up into a complete and utter state. And that was coming from me as a child needing to be on time. And when we weren't, it was a very big thing for my father if we weren't on time. So, as much as what I knew all the stuff, I was still very, very triggered. So, I was trying to be calm, but I could feel inside my body I was bubbling. By the time we got to school, it was the cherry on the top. He wouldn't get out the car. So, he just sat there and he said, I'm not getting out the car. So I walked my daughter across the road, and I came back and I thought, okay, this is it. It's been the whole morning. It's now time to sort myself out. Not to sort him out, to sort myself out. So I closed the door and I stood outside, and I took the biggest, deepest 3 breaths I've ever taken. And then something miraculous happened. I opened the door. He smiled from ear to ear. He jumped out, put his bag on his back, walked across the road, and then he just turned around and said, I love you, Mom.
Oh, wow.
And he's never done that before. And if that wasn't a true reflection of if we just sort ourselves out, the other stuff isn't as bad as what we make it out to be. Because ultimately, what I would have done if I opened, what would have happened? I would have grabbed him, pulled him out, taken him into school, and that's how we would have both started our days. And all it took was a moment for me to check in, breathe, and then he shifted. That's the weirdest thing. Yeah, that's the absolutely weirdest thing. So I wanted to find out from you, what have you learned about yourself over? Now, I've got to remind you that the grade 1 year is really very daunting. And last year we were online, offline. We learned more tech skills than we've ever have in our entire lives. What was it that you can honestly say, if you have to take a step back and say, right, this is what I learned last year? Can you share?
There's many a days where Narav and I sit next to each other when we online schooling and when I'm in meetings. There was many rough days. I think what I wish I could have learned sooner is, like we said, do some introspection first. It's okay. It's fine if he doesn't get to everything, as long as the most important things are done. And it's about shifting my perspective first. And like you said, everything else will come together. That was my biggest learning. I wish it could have happened sooner, but it happened. So I'm glad that it eventually did.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can ask you, what was the shift in perspective? There must have been a moment when you were like, I've got to change something. Something's got to shift. Can you pinpoint that?
So the typical one is, okay, we're here, and then he's got to do his schoolwork, or they got to do something, and naturally, and I think it's all the pressures of life, work, etc. So one of the things was, naturally, I would raise my voice, and that would start a whole tornado of effects. But what I really realized is I needed to give him time and him to realize what he needed to do. And he was fine then. I didn't have to be so pressurizing or saying you need to do it at this time, because I've got such high standards for myself that I'm now portraying that on him but he needs to learn at his own pace. So that was one of the things where I realized, no, I'm putting all my beliefs and pushing it and just putting it on his lap when he needs to find
Wow.
his own feet.
Wow. That's so interesting. And that actually brings me to the next question. What is it about us as adults and the pressure we put on ourselves? And we actually see that our children's performance is a direct reflection of us. We think that they are us. We think that when they're not performing that they are us, but they're not. They are completely their own individual human being. And that pressure doesn't come from external. Nobody else is putting that pressure on us. It's coming from
Yes.
us. And this is where I have to say it's because 99.9% of the time is we worried about how other people are going to perceive us. So we want to look like the good person, the good mother, the loving mother, and all that kind of thing. But there's a really famous quote which says, "I think who am I?" And it's very much about I am who I think you think I am. So I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. It's what I think people think of me, which is such a blurred perspective. And even to this day, how many times do you feel that you have disciplined your children because somebody else was watching, or what somebody else was going to say, or there was that external pressure? I don't know if you can relate to that.
Definitely, definitely. You got to sit still at the restaurant and make sure you're not making a noise, for example. It's the typical society behavior.
Yeah,
But they're
it's
the
crazy.
kids, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is we don't know what they're thinking. And even to this day, with all the work that I've done, I find that when I'm maybe standing outside the school waiting for the kids to come out, um, if my son does something, I have to catch myself because I would allow him to do that stuff at home. But because other people are watching, I would be much more like harsh on him, stopping him, and that kind of thing. So I think if we could start to create a society where we just shifted the focus from other people to ourselves. If we could focus on not the child, on ourselves, I'm telling you now, we would have very, very different results.
Most definitely. Because I mean, for me as well, I don't know if you can relate, but I'm my worst biggest critic. I have such high standards. I want to do this, and and when you don't, if you don't achieve it, then your whole world is tumbling down. So I can imagine just how the little ones must be feeling. If it does come to that point, and what are the tools? How do they move ahead with courage, and how are they going to move ahead and be that brave person that we want them to be?
Absolutely. That really, really is so pertinent. But yeah, so little your little child has just grown in heaps and bounds. And what would you say was the biggest growth for him?
For me, I think the biggest growth is his independence, how he took challenges in his own hands. He tried, his determination, his bravery. It just makes my heart so warm that they can, as little as they are, and in tough times that we're going through, that they're so resilient. And I just take my hat off to them, because our kids are so precious to us, so they make us very proud just for the sheer
That's so beautiful.
resilience.
That's so beautiful. And again, what is more important, having a child who, I'm going to probably have a few teachers hating me after I say this, but what is more important, having a child who is determined and brave and doesn't give up and is resilient and is kind and empathetic, and or a child who finishes their work on time and gets the best marks?
You know, I remember last year you had your certificates, and specifically for my son, you said an award for out of box thinking. It was so wow. It was mind blowing, because he's not a normal, it's not a normal child, and it made us so proud. And for me, having all of those type of abilities makes them shining superstars.
I know.
And I was so proud of that.
Shame. And that really is him. And
Yes,
what a
definitely.
special quality. And if we don't see those things in our children, what do? He would probably never even discover that about himself while he's trying to be something that adults expect him to be, who he's
Yeah,
not.
that's true.
And I think if we can just do more, and the next thing that I wanted to chat about is that I truly believe that we've been put on this earth to learn to love ourselves. I believe that it's a journey without a destination, and it's something we've never been shown how. So, when it comes to self love, I mean, there's even a scripture in the Bible that says, love your neighbor as yourself. But how do we love ourselves, and what does that even look like? So, I've been on a mission to teach people self love, but also to learn to love myself. And like I said, it's a journey without a destination. But what that looks like is little things like forgiving yourself. Can you think about the last time when you made a mistake and how long it took you to let that go?
That's true. Eh? We tend to latch on to that for a long time.
So we forgive our partners, we forgive our children, we forgive everybody else, but then we don't forgive ourselves. And again, how we treat ourselves is how we feel. The other thing is this pressure that we put on ourselves. And we've got this perception that I can't put myself first because it's selfish or my children are more important. But it's such a little tweak in perception, like a twist, if we can just see that we actually have to do it for our kids. So there's that whole thing of when you're on an airplane and the airplane's going down, what do they say? Put your oxygen on first before you can save anybody else. If we don't save ourselves first, we could never, ever be there for our spouses, for our loved ones, for our children, for our colleagues in the best version of ourselves. So when I speak about self love, I think that you've started that journey because I've noticed a big shift with you. And I think that it's got to be to do with treating yourself a little bit more kindly. Am I correct?
Definitely. I think treating myself more kindly, you hit the nail on the head. And I think the other aspect is making time for myself, enjoying the things that I like as me. And I think through the years, my yoga and meditation has helped me in that journey of self-love. So I dedicate on a Tuesday and Wednesday, we have meditation on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday we have yoga. And for me, that's that's where I recharge myself. So it can make me a better person and make, and I'm kinder to myself. So that's my time that really helps.
Absolutely. And even now, like my children will see I'm ratty and they'll say to me, go for a jog. They'll encourage me. Mom, don't you want to have a 20-minute power nap? So they pick up that I need to go and spend some time with me. And they actually encourage it now because they see what wonders it does for me, as opposed to the old mindset of my mom, you need to be there for me all the time. So I think if anything that I really want people to go home with today is that we really shift the focus from what is not in our control, which actually is our kids. As much as what we perceive that we can control them, it's totally an illusion. And what other people think, that's not in our control. What is in our control is to truly just treat ourselves with kindness, to love ourselves, and to deal with our own stuff, develop ourselves, self development, self awareness, all of that stuff. And when we do, we can show up as the best version of ourselves. Um, and our children are the ones that are going to benefit, because ultimately, if I could ask you one last question before we go, what is your wish for your children? If you could say, this is my biggest wish, and that's what I want for them, by the time they are adults, this is what I want.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a
There's
tough
lots
one,
of things.
Candace.
You're going to have to pick one.
I'm going to have to pick one. I want
Shame.
them to be the best that they can be, the kindest person. They must have empathy. And yeah, just try and soar for the great heights, but definitely try to be the best that they possibly can within their control.
Absolutely. And I think that's all that we want as parents. And again, there's that whole saying of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. So we've got to look at what our parents did. And I'm not saying it was only bad, but there's definitely stuff that's just been passed down to generation to generation to generation. And the things that aren't working, it's time for us to start shifting it, and to
Definitely.
make a more conscious decisions. But it's been awesome chatting to you, and well done. I hope you're proud of yourself.
Thank you so much. I am, Candice. It is
So I know tonight was
lovely.
daunting, but you were just so relaxed. It just looks like you've done this all your entire life. So thank you for your bravery, and for coming on. I really appreciate it, and we've loved having you here.
Thank you so much, Candice. I think you made it very easy to come and chat. So thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much, Reshma. Thank you. We'll chat soon, eh?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Cheers,
Bye.
eh? Bye. Bye. So, thank you everybody for watching. That was just our very first episode, and I look so forward to people writing in and really just dealing with stuff. And I think it's time that we start to focus on what we are achieving as opposed to what we're not. So, if you are wanting to be interviewed on this podcast, if it's something that you would be interested in, maybe you have a story that could inspire other parents, then please log on to our website, which is www.grit-grow, so grit-grow, .co.za, and just fill in the contact form and we'll get in touch with you. And I hope that slowly but surely we can start to shift our perspective and ultimately change the world. So thanks, guys. I'll see you next week, same place and same time.